Sometimes I notice the mind tying knots, even when nothing is happening. No problem in front of me, no threat, no demand. Just sitting. And yet something inside feels tight. It's strange how familiar that is. We rarely question it, we call it normal. Thinking, planning, remembering. But if I slow down enough, it doesn't feel neutral. It feels like effort, like holding something in place, as if the mind is constantly gripping reality, afraid that if it lets go, something will fall apart. I might be wrong, but it feels like the mind doesn't create peace or trouble. It creates holding. And that holding slowly turns into a cage. That's the feeling Yoga Vāsiṣṭha keeps pointing me back to. Not as a lesson, more like a quiet reminder. It doesn't argue with the mind. It just watches how the mind builds worlds, and then forgets it built them. How a simple thought becomes a belief becomes a story, and the story becomes a prison we defend with our life. Not because it's true, but because it feels familiar. Think about how easily the mind travels. One memory, and suddenly the body reacts. One idea, and the heart tightens. One imagined future, and fear appears. Even though nothing has changed in the room. The body is here, the breath is here, but the mind is somewhere else, creating weight out of thin air. Yoga Vāsiṣṭha doesn't treat this as a flaw. It treats it as a natural power. The same power that creates suffering also creates freedom. The difference isn't the mind itself. It's whether the mind believes its own stories. Sometimes I catch myself believing a thought just because it appeared, as if appearance equals truth. But when I look closely, thoughts don't arrive with proof. They arrive with confidence, and confidence is convincing. That's how bondage forms, not with chains. With agreement, a silent yes to whatever the mind says next. And once that yes is given, the world rearranges itself to match it. What's unsettling is how gentle this process is. There's no violence in it, no warning signs. Just repetition, the same ideas replayed again and again until they feel solid. Until the mind says, this is who I am, or this is how life works, or this is how things must be. And suddenly, movement feels impossible. Choice feels limited. Not because it is, but because the mind has already decided. Yoga Vāsiṣṭha doesn't ask us to fight thoughts. It almost smiles at that idea. Fighting a thought only gives it more reality, more weight. Instead, it keeps returning to a softer noticing. Watching how a thought rises, stays for a while, and fades. Watching how a whole inner world can appear and disappear without anything actually happening. And in that watching, something loosens. The grip weakens. Not because you tried, but because you saw. I notice how often the mind wants certainty, answers, final meanings. It wants to land somewhere and stop moving. But the moment it lands, it starts building walls, definitions, identities, positions, and those walls slowly turn into limits. Yoga Vāsiṣṭha feels like a whisper saying, maybe don't land so quickly. Maybe stay a little suspended. Let things remain open, unfinished. Because openness doesn't trap you. Conclusions do. There's a quiet honesty in this. It doesn't promise a better personality or a calmer life. It simply shows how suffering is optional, but only if you're willing to question the storyteller inside. Not silence it, not destroy it. Just stop taking every sentence personally. Stop assuming the voice in the head is you. Because once that assumption weakens, the story loses its grip. Sometimes there's a brief gap. You've probably felt it, between two thoughts. Between a reaction and a response. A tiny pause where nothing is being interpreted. In that gap, there's no bondage. No freedom either. Just being. Yoga Vāsiṣṭha seems to live in that gap. Pointing again and again, not to a new idea, but to the absence of one. And strangely, that absence feels lighter than any understanding. What's beautiful is how ordinary this is. No special state required. No posture, no technique. Just seeing clearly that the mind creates meaning, and then suffers under it. The moment that's seen, not intellectually, but quietly, the mind relaxes, not because it's controlled, but because it's no longer believed blindly. And when the mind relaxes, something surprising happens. Nothing dramatic, no fireworks. Just space. A sense that bondage was never imposed from outside. It was imagined, rehearsed, maintained, and if it was created, it doesn't need to be destroyed. It only needs to be seen through. As I sit with this, Another feeling drifts in, almost playful. If bondage is created by belief, then what happens when belief drops instantly? Not gradually, not through effort, but all at once. What happens when the mind doesn't need to be trained or softened, but simply recognized as empty in its own moment? That thought doesn't settle. It doesn't want to. It just hovers, like an open door, like a reminder that freedom might not be a process at all, but a sudden seeing, immediate, unprepared, almost shocking in its simplicity. And maybe that's where this quiet journey keeps moving. Not toward improvement, but toward a kind of effortless release, where nothing needs to change, except the belief that something was ever bound.